On the evening of Friday the 22nd of September 2006, 16-year-old Cassie Jo Stoddart was house-sitting at her aunt and uncle's house in the city of Pocatello in the state of Idaho. She had no idea that she'd been marked for death by two deranged fledgling serial killers, Draper and Torey Adamcik, both 16, her supposed friends, who were hiding in the basement armed with knives, waiting to strike. This pair of monsters, who were apparently inspired by the film Scream, soon snuck upstairs and launched into a frenzied attack, stabbing Cassie 30 times before leaving. This case is horrifying, not just because of the savagery of the murder, but also the recordings Cassie's killers made before and after her death.
Just killed Cassie. We just left her house. This is not a fucking joke.
Welcome to Evil Among Us. There's not much information about the childhoods of both of the perpetrators of this horrific crime, Draper and Torey Adamcik. However, with one of them, there were clear indicators of how dangerous he was, and no one seemed to do anything about it. But both were clearly disturbed, and then meeting brought out the worst in each other, and fueled something that was already there, leading them to slaughter one of their classmates at the age of just 16 years old. Sir Brian Lee Draper was born on Wednesday the 21st of March 1990 in the city of Sandy in Utah, and spent most of his childhood there, before moving north to Idaho and settling in the city of Pocatello when he was a teenager. There's no evidence that Draper suffered abuse during his childhood. In an interview from prison in 2024, he stated, quote, "I had a really good childhood, but my dad was always gone, so I was largely raised by just my mother, and she was busy all the time." But he also added, "I lived an extremely sheltered life and was limited in my experiences. I think the move to junior high school really exposed all the gaps I had in my development and all my vulnerabilities." It's clear, based on what Draper said, that he was a sheltered child, and this appeared to translate into him being socially awkward in school. He was marginalised and had few friends. He's someone who was on the fringes, but he appears desperately wanted to be in the mix, the popular kid, the one with friends, with a pretty girl on his arm. As a substitute for this, Brian Draper withdrew into a world of fantasy, including watching horror movies and surfing the internet, looking at stories of serial killers and mass murderers, and he quickly became fixated with Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, who on Tuesday the 29th of April 1999 murdered 13 students at Columbine High School in Colorado before turning the guns on themselves. However, Draper didn't see two pathetic morons slaughtering innocent people. He saw power, a way to punish those who rejected him, to make his mark on the world, and he soon began dressing like his idols, including turning up at school in a black trench coat. Draper was open online about his fixation with the Columbine killers, with him writing on his MySpace page that if he could meet anyone, it would be Harris and Klebold. His profile on MySpace also gives an insight into the disturbed teenager that Draper was becoming. There was a line on the profile which read, "Many people don't know that ... and Draper wrote, quote, "I'm insane. No, really. I'm sick in the head." Under the line, "I am ... he wrote, quote, "An atheist, anarchist, antichrist." Draper was right. He was sick in the head, and he demonstrated this several times, but no one did anything about it. So in February 2004, about 2.5 years before the murder covered in this video, a student reported that Draper, by this point 13 years old, and another student called Chris Nix were planning a shooting at the school, Irving Middle School. This came about because the pair were on the phone to a fellow student, and they began saying they were going to carry out the shooting on the 13th of March. This student, like others at the school, knew about the pair's fixation with the Columbine killers, and so recorded the conversation, egging the pair on to get more evidence. She then took the recording to the principal. Draper and Nix were then hauled in, and also in the meeting was an officer from Pocatello Police Department called Kristen Oakes, the officer assigned to the school. Both said they were only joking and had only carried on talking about committing a massacre because they'd been egged on by the student they were talking to. They were both warned that making these statements, even if they were just a joke, was unacceptable, and that was it. Nothing was really looked into, not his internet footprint, nothing. If they had, they would have found that Draper created a website dedicated to the Columbine killers, and had even written his own story called Dark River, in which he described himself and Chris Nix going on a shooting spree. In this story, he'd written in graphic detail about slaughtering his fellow students, describing the sights, smells and tastes he would experience. The story ended with his own obituary. Just a month later, the alarm was raised again, when it was reported that Brian Draper and another student called Joey Lacey were at the school dance and were openly talking about how this would be a perfect venue to carry out a shooting, as due to the limited space and ensuing panic, they could kill dozens of people. The pair had then gone around the dance, pretending to shoot attendees with their fingers. Again, Draper was hauled in front of the principal and Officer Oakes. This time, things were taken more seriously. Initially, Draper claimed that he hadn't been talking about a school shooting, but that he and Lacey had been running around pretending to shoot people with paintball guns. Officer Oakes did question people, but didn't verify key information. So it's reported that Draper's obsession with Harris and Klebold was such that he had pictures of them on his wall. Officer Oakes called Brian Draper's mother Pamela and asked if this was true, but she denied this, but no visit to the home was made to verify. In fact, the investigation quickly focused on Chris Nix, the student from the previous incident, due to other comments he'd made. The investigation concluded with Nix being removed from the school. Nothing happened to Brian Draper. He was not suspended, expelled, or even put forward for psychological assessment. I mean, this is ridiculous. A guy in the space of 2 months brags about wanting to kill other students twice, and this was just brushed under the carpet. Even if he was quote-unquote joking, this demonstrates a very fucked up mindset, someone who is already, or could potentially be, very dangerous. Draper appears to have hidden his dark thoughts after this point, and he carried on through his education, moving to Pocatello High School. Here, he would meet an equally disturbed teenager called Torey Michael Adamcik. Adamcik was born on Thursday the 14th of June 1990 and was a native of Pocatello. He was the son of Shannon and Sean Adamcik. Shannon's name will come up again later in this video because, as we'll get to, despite overwhelming evidence of her son's guilt, she claimed he was innocent. She even released a book in 2012 called The Guilty Innocent. Seriously, her statements are unhinged. In the book, Shannon describes her son as having an idyllic childhood, not wanting for anything, always being loved and supported, but that he'd always been quite naive. This appears to link to the general theme of her book, which I want you to keep in mind as I present the evidence in this case. That Torey Adamcik wanted no part of the murder. He thought it was all a joke. He was not a violent kid. He was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, someone who had been manipulated by Brian Draper. The reality is that Torey Adamcik was just as sick and twisted as Draper, but it appears much better at hiding it. There were no obvious red flags reported, but I imagine behind closed doors there were, but these were just swept under the carpet, and it's unlikely that Shannon Adamcik would put these in print, not wanting to shatter the illusion of her perfect son. Giving an idea of the fact that Adamcik was a twisted individual, during subsequent court proceedings, it was reported that he had a trove of child abuse images, so not so innocent after all. With regards to violence, he too was obsessed with horror films, and likely, like his co-defendant, obsessed with violence and gore from a young age, drawn to the power that murder could give him. This is not the story of two childhood friends going on a rampage. Brian Draper and Torey Adamcik knew each other for just a short time before the murder. Later, in a clip I'll play, Adamcik claimed they'd only hung out for 6 weeks before the crime, but this isn't true, and clearly his attempt to distance himself from his fellow killer. In other articles, it's reported they knew each other for about 6 months, but according to Shannon Adamcik's book, the pair met in around late 2005. This happened in science class, where Torey Adamcik usually sat on a table with the victim in this case, Cassie Jo Stoddart, and another student called Jade. Jade left the school, and Draper took her place. Draper and Adamcik soon began bonding over their love of violence and their choice of movies, with both stating that the film Scream was one of their favourites. The pair brought out the worst in each other, and they decided they wanted to make their own horror movie, turning their sick fantasies into reality, and less than 12 months after first meeting, they would butcher a fellow student, someone who considered them her friends. Whose idea it was to escalate things is not clear, and changes depending on who you ask. In a prison interview in 2024, Brian Draper said, quote, "We were skipping an orientation assembly in my junior year of high school. We were hiding out in the bathroom. We were mimicking the movie Scream, and he asked me, 'Brian, you ever thought about doing something actually real?' And I told him I had. I've been reading about Columbine and thinking about it. I was at a very vulnerable place in my life, so the worst actual possible thing that could happen to me was meeting Torey." But, according to Shannon Adamcik, her son was the naive one, drawn into the web of Brian Draper. The truth is that Draper and Adamcik were just as bad as each other, both obsessed with violence, both feeling marginalised, wanted to end the life of another human being in order to feel a sense of power and excitement. The pair decided not only to live out their sick fantasies, but also to film them, make their own horror movie, and the footage they shot shows how evil they are. In July 2006, 3 months before the murders, Draper and Adamcik sat in the latter's house and began writing out their ideas for scenarios and planning the weapons they needed. They documented their thoughts in a notebook that was later recovered by the police, which was in Adamcik's handwriting. Contained within its pages were 2 scenarios, one which involved the pair chasing a woman before stabbing her to death, and another which involved a male meeting a similar end. Under the heading Weapons, he wrote, quote, "Hunting knife, survival knife, cutting knife, throwing knife, switchblade, pocket knife, scythe, hatchet, axe, handgun, chainsaw." The next month, on or around Thursday the 31st of August 2006, Torey Adamcik and Brian Draper started to purchase their kill kit. They tried to buy knives from a pawn shop, but they were turned away because they were underage. Adamcik then called his 18-year-old friend, Joe Lucero, who bought the knives for them. He bought 4 in total, including a hunting knife and a knife with a serrated blade. These would be the weapons that they would use just 3 weeks later to end the life of their school friend. The pair also bought masks to hide their identity. Shannon Adamcik said that her son had told her that he and Draper were making a horror film, but, quote, "Truthfully, I was not concerned as I should have been. I knew that Torey was more interested in humour than violence. Seriously, it's like this woman didn't know her child at all." Shannon also found one of the masks that would later be used in the killing, but dismissed this simply as a movie prop. However, this disturbed pair were deadly serious, and Draper later reported that both he and Adamcik broke into various houses, apparently just rehearsals for the final act. They'd also begun selecting a number of targets, and whilst Cassie Stoddart would be their eventual victim, it appears they had at least one other female student in mind, and her name was Danielle Morrison. And during the evening of Thursday the 21st of September 2006, Brian Draper and Torey Adamcik drove to her house, apparently to see if she was home alone, so they could kill her.
We're going for a high death count.
We're not going not to get caught, Ryan. If we're going for guns, we're just going to end it. We're just going to grab the guns and get out of there, kill everybody and leave.
We're going to make history. We're going to make history.
For all you FBI agents watching this, you weren't quick enough.
We were quick enough and you weren't smart enough. And we're going over today, Nixon's house. We're gonna go snoop around over there and try to see if she's home alone or not. And if she's home alone, splat! She did.
Don't put your humor into this, Brian.
I'm not putting humor into it. Yep. People will die. And then memories will fade.
Memories will fade. I wonder what movie you got that from, Brian.
Myself. That was for myself.
No wonder it was so lame.
Okay, we're on our way, and I'll let you stay tuned. We're almost there.
Just a few minutes later, the camera was turned on again. They'd apparently decided that Danielle was not a good target. Why is unclear. But next on their list was Cassie and her boyfriend Matt Beckham, and they travelled to her home, apparently intending to kill them both if no one else was in the house. The horrifying thing about these videos is knowing that these two were not joking, and noticeably they were driving around with their kill kit in the car, which they would use just 24 hours later.
We're gonna go to that church over there, and we're gonna call a girl and a guy named Cassie and Matt. They're our friends, but we have to make sacrifices. So, I feel tonight it is the night, and I feel really weird. It's not my stomach and stuff, and I feel like I want to kill somebody. So, I know that's not normal, but what the hell?
I feel we need to break away from normal life.
How bright is this light?
Because, let's put it this way. Parents, along with their parents, and so on, taught them about God, Jesus, the whole bullshit line. I'm sure you guys believe in God as well. I realized when I was in 7th grade, you don't believe in Santa Claus or vampires or werewolves. They're used to metaphor, not to let, they teach their kids back in the 1800s, I learned this in English class, about telling their kids that you can't go outside or a vampire will get you, just to make their kids stay and do what they want to do. God is basically the same way.
Yep.
Trying to get people to do good, or else, so-called, you go to hell.
And we're obviously going to hell if it's real, but you know what, who gives a shit?
Yeah, and why would you say
it's real?
real?
It's not real, because it's so blatantly obvious it's not real, but
people believe it because their parents teach them, and so it's so hard for them to let go of it because they've been taught their whole life.
Yeah, I know.
But fucking the point I'm making is we are also taught that things like killing people and other thing is wrong. The only thing that it's wrong about is because it's breaking the law, and the law is only wrong. The law
Natural selection, dude.
Because
natural selection, that's all I gotta say.
There should be no law against killing people. I know it's a wrong thing, but hell, you restrict somebody from it, they're gonna want it more.
When they got to Cassie's house, they knocked on the door, and her stepfather Victor Price let them in. The plan was called off. There was someone else present, so they made some feeble excuse to come inside. They spoke to Matt and Cassie, and unfortunately Cassie, believing that these teenagers were her friends, revealed that the next evening she would be house-sitting for her aunt and uncle, and invited them over. Torey Adamcik and Brian Draper left after around 15 minutes, and their eyes must have lit up. They knew where Cassie was going to be and when. She was now top of their list, and they could finally live out their fantasies of taking a human life. But who was Cassie Jo Stoddart? Whilst Adamcik and Draper saw her as nothing more than a piece of meat, she was a person, by all accounts an exceptional young woman. She was born on Thursday the 21st December 1989 in Pocatello to Anna Maria Cisneros and Ronald J. Stoddart. She had an older sister called Christy and a younger brother called Andrew. Cassie's parents separated when she was young, and she became very close to her stepfather Victor. They were a close-knit family, and Cassie was known for her infectious smile and her maturity. Her brother Andrew, who was her best friend, stated that she was a role model, someone who was responsible and kind-hearted, who always put others first. I haven't seen anything about what she eventually wanted to be, but she could have been anything. She was a straight-A student and had the world at her feet. But her life had come to an end at the age of just 16 years old, her light snuffed out by two monsters who never contributed anything to this world. I often use words such as evil and psychopath in my videos, but it's very rare that I can show evidence which illustrates this so perfectly, but this case is an exception. Brian Draper and Torey Adamcik used their camcorder to film both before and after the murder, and this footage demonstrates their level of depravity, their complete lack of remorse, and their disregard for human life. So Friday the 22nd of September 2006 was the day chosen to kill 16-year-old Cassie Stoddart. Draper and Adamcik were giddy with anticipation. They went to school as usual, video camera in hand, making their movie, documenting their crimes to achieve the fame they were desperate for, unaware, or perhaps indifferent, this would eventually send them to prison for the rest of their lives. The video they shot that day includes this horrifying interaction between Brian Draper and Cassie.
Actually, I was really actually going to do it.
Oh, yeah?
I was like, I want to brush your hair.
Hey, look, it's Cassie.
Hey, look, I don't know.
Hello, Cassie. I'm getting you on tape, okay? Say hi, please. Hi. Okay, see ya. Wait, have you seen Torey? He's supposed to meet me here at 7:30, and it's 8:19. He's an hour late. You don't even care, dude. Okay. See ya.
Oh, dude, I totally.
To you and me, who are not complete fucking psychopaths, this video is haunting. Watching a woman, a child, who less than 24 hours later will be brutally murdered. But for these sick bastards, this is all part of the fun, all part of the power trip. I've said in previous videos how important the steps before the murder are, and this is a perfect example of this. Draper was filming his prey, getting off on the fact that Cassie had no idea she would soon be dead. She was smiling at him, but in his mind he was thinking, I'm going to kill you. You'll never see another sunrise, never have a future, never have children, and that's all because of me. You have no idea. A few hours later, this evil pair sat down to discuss their plan and compile their kill list, all part of their guide to future aspiring serial killers, all part of their sick movie.
Torey, September 22nd, 2006. We're skipping our 4th hour. We're writing our plan right now for tonight. It's gonna be cool. This is our teacher is right.
I like the way this scenario begins, and we kill her.
Let's do it. End it.
That evening, Cassie went to 11372 West Whispering Cliffs Drive in Pocatello, the house of her aunt and uncle, Alison and Frank Contreras. They were out of town, but they'd hired Cassie to house sit and look after their pets. Cassie's boyfriend, Matt Beckham, arrived at around 6 p.m, and Draper and Adamcik, who had been invited over the night before, arrived at around 7:30 or 8 p.m. The four sat down to watch Kill Bill Volume 2. Cassie showed the two people who just hours later would end her life around the house, including the basement. All the time, they were finalising their plan. At around 9 p.m, before the film had ended, Brian Draper and Torey Adamcik suddenly said they needed to leave as they wanted to go to the cinema to watch a movie in town. Cassie was unaware that before the pair left, Draper had unlocked the basement door so they could break in later undetected. They then went and collected the kill kit from the car. This included the knives they'd bought, but also dark clothing, gloves, and these white painted masks. These were not going to be worn to conceal their identity. They were going to kill Cassie, so it didn't matter if she saw their faces. This was to terrify her, to make her last moments as horrific as possible. These pricks are beyond evil. They then sat in the car down the road from the house and continued their video journal. It appears at one point, according to what they say, they were also going to kill Matt Beckham.
The time is 9:50, September 22nd, 2006. Unfortunately, we have the grueling task of killing our two friends, and they are right in that house just down the street.
We just talked to them. We were there for an hour. But
We checked out the whole house. We know there's lots of doors. There's lots of places to hide. I unlocked the back doors. It's all unlocked. Now we just gotta wait. And yeah, we're really nervous right now, but you know, we're ready.
we're listening to the greatest rock band
We've
ever,
waited for this for a long time.
Pink Floyd, before we commit the ultimate crime of murder.
We waited for this for a long time.
Moments after this video ended, they snuck back into the house through the open basement door. Matt and Cassie were upstairs watching TV, and Draper and Adamcik began making loud noises, including banging the door, trying to lure them downstairs. They then flipped the circuit breaker, plunging the house into darkness, again trying to get their targets to come downstairs, but they didn't take the bait, and so some of the lights were switched back on. Matt and Cassie appeared to believe this was just a temporary power outage, and didn't suspect that two killers were hiding in the basement. However, Matt would later say that one of the dogs was staring down the stairs, barking and growling. There was then one of those sliding doors moments, a sequence of decisions which would condemn a 16-year-old girl to a horrific death. Specifically, seeing that Cassie was scared, Matt called his mother and asked if he could stay the night, but this request was refused. However, as an alternative, she said that Cassie was more than welcome to stay at their house, and then she'd be driven back to the property in Whispering Cliffs Drive the next morning. However, Cassie, the responsible teenager that she was, said that she couldn't leave the animals. She didn't want to let her aunt and uncle down. At 10:30 p.m, Matt Beckham's mother came to pick him up, and after saying goodbye to Cassie, he left. We'll never know what would have happened had Matt stayed. Maybe he would have been able to fight off Draper and Adamcik. Maybe they would have thought better of their plan and left. Maybe he would have died too. However, he lived, and Cassie was now alone in the house, in the last hour of her life. After he had left, Matt called Adamcik's phone to see whether he could maybe meet up with him later. He picked up, but was whispering, and Matt could barely hear him before the line went dead. He assumed that he and Draper were in the cinema, unaware they were hiding in the basement of the house he just left, and were about to kill his girlfriend. Brian Draper and Torey Adamcik then flipped the circuit breaker again, cutting power to the house. They then quietly snuck upstairs. Cassie had settled down on the sofa and had fallen asleep. As one last attempt to scare her, Draper opened and slammed a closet door, but nothing happened. So they gave up on their attempts to psychologically torture their so-called friend and approached her on the sofa and launched into a vicious attack. Cassie was attacked by both men. Draper was armed with a hunting knife, and Adamcik was wielding the serrated blade. Cassie was stabbed 30 times in the chest, arms, legs, throat and back. Her arms and hands were covered in defensive injuries, showing that she'd fought for her life, and these wounds also indicated she knew she was about to die. She must have been absolutely terrified. 12 of the wounds were later determined to have been potentially fatal on their own, but the one that likely killed Cassie was the one that passed through her heart. This was inflicted with the hunting knife, indicating that it was Brian Draper who inflicted it. Cassie Stoddart was then left to bleed to death on the living room floor, with her likely dying in under 2 minutes. Draper and Adamcik were buzzing. As they drove away, they continued their sickening documentary.
Just killed Cassie. We just left her house. This is not a fucking joke.
I'm shaking.
I stabbed her in the throat and I saw her lifeless body just disappear. Dude, I just killed Cassie. Oh, fuck. That felt like it wasn't even real. I mean, it went by so fast.
Shut the fuck up. We gotta get our act straight.
It's okay. Okay, let's buy movie tickets now.
Okay.
Come on. Goodbye.
No.
The next day, Saturday the 23rd of September 2006, the pair met up again and travelled to the Black Rock Canyon area. Here, they burned the evidence against them, including the murder weapons, their clothes and the mask they were wearing, and the videotape from the camcorder, before burying them, but they did a piss poor job. Draper and Adamcik then perversely met up with Matt Beckham, the man they considered killing the day before. They saw him calling Cassie and showing concern and confusion, which she didn't pick up. I imagine they were smirking, knowing that she was lying butchered on the living room floor. At 1:30 p.m, On Sunday the 24th of September 2006, Cassie Stoddart's aunt and uncle returned home. Their 13-year-old daughter Kelsey noticed a TV was on, and she walked into the living room and was the first to see her cousin's mutilated body lying on the floor. A frantic 911 call was made.
What's going on?
Somebody looks dead on my flag. Oh my God, it's my cousin's daughter. I need an ambulance.
Let me get you order medical. Stay on the line.
Oh God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Get everybody out. There's a girl dead on my floor.
Honey, is she breathing?
No, she isn't. She's cold. Oh my God.
She's cold as cut.
She's cold.
Okay, do you want to start CPR?
Her fingers are blue.
Okay, how old is she?
She's 16, 17. And her mom just drove up here and she's dead.
Okay, hon, we're going to get them coming, okay?
Oh my God, okay.
Cassie was lying on her back by the sofa in the living room. Her right foot and leg were tangled in a cord attached to the PlayStation, which was plugged into the front of the TV. Her arms were splayed out, with her hands pointing upwards, and her head was tilted to the right side. She was lying in a pool of blood. The stab wounds to Cassie's body were immediately obvious, as well as the defensive injuries to her arms and hands, including her little finger on her left hand almost being severed. Cassie was wearing yellow pajama bottoms, covered in stars, moons and suns, as well as a white strap top, both of which were covered in blood. It was clear there was nothing that could be done, and 16-year-old Cassie Jo Stoddart was pronounced dead at the scene, and a murder investigation began. Initially, suspicion fell on Matt Beckham, Cassie Stoddart's boyfriend, but he was quickly eliminated after he passed a polygraph test. However, his statement quickly brought the police to the doors of Brian Draper and Torey Adamcik, with both of them being hauled in for questioning. They'd both clearly come up with a cover story. After leaving Cassie's house, they'd gone to the cinema to see the movie Pulse, but neither could recall any details of the film. But they had a backup story if Plan A failed. They were actually breaking into cars. The pair obviously thought they were very clever, admit to a lesser crime to deflect from a more serious one. Hopefully the police would think, oh, they must be being honest. Why would anyone admit to a crime? We obviously have the wrong people. These two are fucking idiots. The detectives called both of them out of their bullshit and focused on Brian Draper. Despite all of his bravado on camera, he turned into a sad, simpering little boy during his interviews. He was stuttering and shaking, and the police knew he was the weak link, and they leant on him. During interview number 3, on Wednesday the 27th of September 2006, 5 days after the murder, Draper cracked. He admitted that he and Adamcik had broken into Cassie's aunt's house and they'd snuck upstairs after Matt Beckham had gone home. He then said that Adamcik had stabbed Cassie. He didn't know this was going to happen and thought they were just there to scare her. Draper denied that he touched Cassie in any way. He claimed that he'd lied to the police earlier because he'd been threatened with death by Torey Adamcik. He agreed to take detectives to the site in the Black Rock Canyon area where he said Adamcik had buried evidence which he'd been forced to help hide out of fear. Draper was trying to save his own skin, but he condemned them both. The knives, masks and gloves were of particular interest. The serrated knife recovered had DNA from Cassie on the blade, showing it was one of the murder weapons. One of the masks had DNA from Adamcik, and Cassie's blood was also found on a glove. Brian Draper's DNA was also found under Cassie's fingernails, inevitably from when she scratched him while she fought for her life. However, the key piece of evidence was the videotape, the one containing all the bragging, all the planning. This had been burnt in order to destroy it. Draper, hilariously, tried to tell detectives that the videotape had nothing to do with Cassie's murder, and he even asked for it back. Of course, the detectives said no, and they knew this was likely the smoking gun, and it was. The tape was restored and laid bare the depravity of both killers. On the same day that this evidence was recovered, both Brian Draper and Torey Adamcik were formally arrested on suspicion of first-degree murder. Adamcik shut down and refused to answer any further questions, but Draper was in a panic. He was desperate to get ahead of this. He knew he couldn't get away from the fact he was there, and it was clear that 2 knives were used, indicating that 2 people had stabbed Cassie. So during interview number 4, On Thursday the 28th of September 2006, 2 days after being arrested and 6 days after the murder, Draper admitted stabbing Cassie 4 times in the leg and chest, but said that he only did this because Adamcik had said, quote, "You need to stab her, you need to stab her." He only complied because he was afraid for his life. So Brian Draper went from "I wasn't there" to "I was there but I didn't do anything" to "Here's the buried evidence" to "I was there and did stab Cassie, but only a bit because I was afraid." His attempt to wriggle out of what he'd done didn't work, and both 16-year-old boys were charged with 1 count of first-degree murder and 1 count of conspiracy to commit murder. Both pleaded not guilty, and they were held in prison to await their fate. Brian Draper and Torey Adamcik were tried separately, and due to the severity of their crime, they were tried as adults. Their strategies were the same: blame the other one. Draper's trial began in early April 2007. His defence continued with his bullshit claim that he thought the whole thing was a joke and that he only realised what was going on when Adamcik began stabbing Cassie, and he only plunged a knife into her through fear. However, the evidence was overwhelming, with his own words being used against him, both from the police interview but also him bringing it on video. The statement, quote, "I stabbed her in the throat and I saw her lifeless body," in particular came back to bite him. The prosecution also outlined Draper's obsession with the Columbine killers and his previous history of bragging about wanting to carry out a school shooting. They exposed Draper for what he was: a smug, self-absorbed, remorseless killer. Someone who, had he gotten away with it, would have done it again and again. On Tuesday the 17th of April 2007, Brian Draper was found guilty of the first-degree murder of Cassie Stoddart, as well as conspiracy to murder in the first degree. Torey Adamcik's trial began on Thursday the 31st of May 2007, and his defence was almost the same as Draper's, with the roles reversed. He claimed that he didn't know what was going to happen. He believed they were simply there making a movie. According to him, they'd broken into Cassie's home simply to scare her, and it was only after Draper started stabbing her that he realised it was all real. The defence leaned heavily on the same words that had been used to convict Brian Draper: the fact that he'd said he stabbed Cassie and killed her. This meant, they argued, that he'd done it on his own. Yes, Adamcik was there, but he took no part in the murder. The defence relied heavily on the fact that aside from his DNA on the mask, there was no evidence directly tying their client to the murder. The defence called a number of family members and friends of Adamcik to the stand, all of whom testified about his kind nature. He was not violent, he loved others. Cassie was his friend, he would never hurt her. However, the fact that 2 knives had been used to murder Cassie and the contents of the video condemned him. The prosecution specifically pointed out him smiling and smirking in the footage, including when they were speeding away from the murder scene. Torey Adamcik was not scared, he was buzzing. He too was shown to be a remorseless killer, a sick degenerate. On Friday the 8th of June 2007, he too was found guilty of the first-degree murder of Cassie Stoddart, as well as conspiracy to commit murder in the first degree. On Tuesday the 21st of August 2007, 17-year-old Brian Draper and 17-year-old Torey Adamcik were sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Both have, in the almost 2 decades since, appealed their convictions and sentences. These motions have all been denied. They remain incarcerated to this day, with Brian Draper, now aged 35, serving his time at the Idaho State Correctional Institute. Torey Adamcik, also 35 years old, is incarcerated at the Savagery Correctional Center in Arizona. The lack of remorse of both killers and their unwillingness to take responsibility for their actions has continued to this day, with both blaming the other. With regards to Torey Adamcik, he has, to the best of my knowledge, not given any recent interviews, but I did find this clip of him with his parents, which I believe was before his trial, but potentially after he'd been convicted. But regardless, it's clear that his parents, specifically his mother Shannon, has no idea who their son really is, and he's able to avoid taking responsibility for anything, because his family clearly think the sun shines out of his arse.
Torey's a great kid, and Torey's just a kind person, and we're still a family. He's still every bit as much a part of our family as before.
I remember the first article I read about my case. Geez, I mean, they made me sound like this brutal, cold,
psychopathic killer.
They were talking about Brian. They were making you just like Brian.
They put us like as the same person.
They lumped them together.
I only hung out with him for 6 weeks before this happened. I think it's crazy how the last week of me being on the street, being free, really has affected the rest of my life. If you were to watch that video and nothing had happened, it would literally be a joke. Tells me to go to bed early or whatever, just the typical stuff, but I don't know, I think they're just worried about me.
Just a really good kid.
Torey's a good kid, and Torey's just a kind person, and we're still a family. He's still every bit as much a part of our family as before.
I remember the first article I read about my case. Geez, I mean, they made me sound like this brutal, cold, psychopathic killer.
They were talking about Brian. They were making you just like Brian.
They put us like as the same person.
They lumped them together.
I only hung out with him for 6 weeks before this happened. I think it's crazy how the last week of me being on the street, being free, really has affected the rest of my life. If you were to watch that video and nothing had happened, it would literally be a joke.
As I said earlier, Shanna released a book called The Guilty Innocent, published in 2012. It's an insane screed. Don't get me wrong, no parent wants to believe that their son is a killer, but Shannon seems incapable of grasping reality. The book opens with the following quote: "My pain is about my child. In the victim impact statement, we were told there was only one victim. I say that is not true. We were all victims. My son is innocent. He did not kill anyone. He did not intend to kill anyone." It also includes such nuggets as, quote, "Torey couldn't understand how this happened. In the beginning, he could not even seem to believe that it had happened. It took a long time for the denial to pass, and even then, Torey couldn't believe that Brian actually planned to do it, that Brian, his friend, had been serious when he talked about killing Cassie. And Torey struggled with the emotions of losing his friend Cassie, watching his own life disappear right in front of his eyes. There was the denial, the grief, the loss and the pain. Everything was gone so fast, all the potential, the life, over." When she says the life, I think she means her son's life. Ignore the fact that Cassie Stoddart is gone forever. It's so tone deaf, but I think it tells us something about the family dynamic which is important to our profile. As to Brian Draper, again he is just a victim, someone who had no idea what was going on, as he says in this recent interview.
The individual who snuck downstairs and locked the basement door, and it's that one choice where I was just kind of going along with it. I really didn't stop and say, why am I doing this? I just did it. And that one thing that I did, started this whole thing. And that's something that is hard to deal with, because all I had to do was just not do that. And this may have never happened.
To be honest, are we surprised that neither of these pieces of shit have ever taken responsibility for their actions, or actually apologised? If they did, would it really matter? I doubt either of them really has the ability to feel remorse for what they've done. Ultimately, they have decades locked up ahead of them. Fuck the pair of them. May they rot. I cannot make this video without mentioning the most important person in this case, Cassie Jo Stoddart. I always make sure I pay tribute to the victims in these videos in a separate section. I refuse to talk about the scum that ended their lives in this part. They don't deserve it. So Cassie was laid to rest on Sunday the 1st of October 2006 at Mountain View Cemetery in Pocatello. Her funeral was attended by 500 people, a testament to how loved she was. On the back of her tombstone is written, "We will love you forever," followed by the words from the poem A Broken Chain by Ron Tramner, which reads, "We little knew that day God was going to call your name. In life we loved you dearly, in death we do the same. Broke our hearts to lose you. You did not go alone, for part of us went with you, the day God called you home. You left us beautiful memories, your love is still our guide, and though we cannot see you, you're always at our side. Our family chain is broken, and nothing seems the same, but as God calls us one by one, the chain will link again. Cassie would have been just 35 years old today. Maybe she would have been married with children, but we'll never know. Her life was extinguished before it had really begun. Tragically, her mother Anna Marie passed away from cancer in 2022, aged just 57. She was laid to rest with her daughter. Hopefully, they've been reunited on the other side, never to be parted again. Cassie Jo Stoddart was born on Thursday the 21st December 1989, and her short life came to an end 16 years later, on Friday the 22nd of September 2006. May she rest in eternal peace. This is another case I've covered of two evil, depraved individuals who are fundamentally weak, pathetic people who use violence and murder to feel powerful, to feel like real men. The psychology of Brian Draper is quite clear. He seems to have been quite isolated and sheltered as a child. This led to him feeling powerless, marginalised, something he hated. He looked at others around him with envy, but rather than doing anything about this situation, he sat and seethed. Violence became his escape, and he idolised Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold because they, in his twisted mind, hit back at society, a society that rejected them. They had real power. Their names echoed long after they were dead. He wanted that. He emulated his idols in the way he dressed, clearly his pathetic attempts to gain attention, and he made brags about committing school shootings. I don't think there was any credibility in this. I think he deliberately made these comments so others would hear, they would notice him, they would be shocked. He would go from the person no one saw to the focus of attention. He liked that he could cause fear and terror in other people. No doubt he'd been having fantasies about killing for years, but him meeting Torey Adamcik is what pushed him over the edge. We know nothing really about Adamcik's upbringing. Well, not the truth anyway. We have the version his mother presents, which is clearly bullshit. He too likely felt marginalised, and fantasies about violence were his outlet. The simpering statements of his mother indicate to me that there were likely red flags when he was growing up, but these were covered up or ignored, teaching him that he could do whatever he wanted, even murder, and his parents would simply turn the other cheek, or worse, despite overwhelming evidence, make excuses for him. Both had no empathy and no remorse. I've not seen any formal diagnosis for Draper and Adamcik, but if I read that they were psychopathic, then I would not be surprised. And so, the pair decided to kill to make themselves feel all-powerful, like gods. But there was more to it than that. It wasn't just the act of murder they wanted, it was the whole preamble. The pair have become known as the Scream Killers, but I think it's got lost why this film was so important to them, why this horror film and not another. I believe this is because of the type of film Scream is. Yes, it's a horror film, but there's also a strong psychological element, especially with the first kill of Casey Becker, played by Drew Barrymore. There's a slow build-up, with the killer taunting her. You see her go from jovial to terrified. Then there's the chase before the kill itself. I think this element of the film, and likely this opening scene, is what drew them to the movie. They wanted to terrify their victim, hence the build-up to the death of Cassie, banging doors, wearing masks, turning lights on and off. They wanted to see the terror in her eyes. Yes, they wanted to kill her, but I think that causing her as much alarm and distress in her final moments was just as important. In this respect, I believe that these two can also be labelled as sadists. They got off on the fear of others. I think there's quite an important detail that some commentators miss, which indicates that Cassie was not targeted at random. However, in order to understand this, we need to consider someone else who they targeted, a fellow student called Danielle Morrison, whose house they apparently drove up to the day before to see if she was alone so they could kill her. Apparently, Brian Draper was infatuated with Danielle and both fancied Cassie and would flirt with her. I think that these two women were targeted due to these two losers despite the fact they couldn't have them. Potentially, they were not backed by both of them, or perhaps they were simply in the friend zone, but I think they were specifically targeted because both of them had in some way rejected them. So them murdering Cassie was not just their way of gaining a sense of power, but it was also an act of punishment, killing her for daring to deny them what they thought they were entitled to. This would potentially explain the frenzied nature of the attack. They didn't just kill Cassie, they butchered her. So as well as elements of sadism, I also think that Draper and Adamcik could potentially be considered today what have become known as incels, individuals who despise women for rejecting them. Luckily, the pair were caught quickly, but I have no doubt, had they not, they would have carried on killing. I think they would have continued to target women. They had developed a taste for it, and they would have carried on until they were caught or put down. So what are your thoughts on this case? If you like the content, then consider becoming a channel member by clicking the join button, and you can also send a one-off donation to support the channel via the thanks button. Please like, share and subscribe. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.